This is the I without the disorder, and today I'm going to talk about dysfunctional family roles. So dysfunctional family roles describes how in an unhealthy family, typically the children get cast into a set of just a few stereotypical roles, and they get cast into these roles not only by the parents, but there also are other important factors like the birth order, whether they have any siblings at all, and also their inborn personality types, and the parents usually don't consciously, though they might consciously put them into a certain role, but very often this also happens subconsciously. It all depends on, or a lot depends on what the parents, what they value and how they react to their children. So I'm going to give you a rundown of the different roles. The first role is that of the golden child, and this is a child in the family who is basically the most privileged. It's like they cannot do any wrong. So typically with dysfunctional families, there's a lot of hierarchy. There's a very strict framework of power, and it's very stratified. Like there's not a lot of equality between the different members of the family. So this will also apply to the caregivers if they are the parents. One of the parents will have more power than the other, and I mostly know this framework of dysfunctional family roles in the as it applies to narcissistic families. So when at least one of the caregivers is a narcissist, but it can also happen in other types of families. It can be an abusive family where there are no narcissists, or it can be there can be families that have a lot of chaos and trauma. There can be substance abuse. So it can be very individual how this applies to every family, but typically there's a lot of power hierarchy and a lot of power struggles, and typically there's one parent who's on top of the hierarchy and who has the most power in all of the family, and they tend to be the one who cast the children into these roles, and the other parent just goes along with that. I'm not sure if there's an official name for this most powerful parent. In a narcissistic family, obviously it's a narcissist. I don't know if there's a certain name for it when there's no narcissism, but the parent who has less power typically gets called the enabler, because they enable the power and the abuse of the other parent. It doesn't mean that they are not an abuser themselves. They can be just as much of an abuser. So the golden child then is the child who is picked by the most powerful parent, and basically to be their heir. So it's very common that this tends to be the eldest child, but it doesn't have to be that. That's just in very conservative families, or in the past, this happened a lot, and it still happens a lot. And even though the golden child, they don't get punished, they have a lot of privileges over their siblings if they have any, but they're still being, it's not the same as really valuing your child for who they are and really loving them and giving them the freedom to be whoever they are and exploring their identity. Because the golden child learns from early on that they have to perform in a certain way in order to gain the approval of the parents, and especially the most powerful parent. So it's like they learn being accepted and loved, or what they think love is, comes at a price. They have to pay for it. They have to behave in a certain way. They have to have certain beliefs. So just like the other children in the different roles, they will also learn that they are not good as they are. They're not good enough. So there's also a lot of shame, which is a typical thing that people with complex trauma and with childhood trauma struggle with. So the golden child learns that they always have to wear this mask of, and they always have to be successful. And what successful means can differ widely from different families. It might mean being good at school, having good grades, having a certain type of job, maybe with a lot of social status, or where they make a lot of money, or where they get a lot of attention, or maybe just something, or maybe it's just the same job as the most powerful parent had, or just something that they value. It's all about what the most powerful parent or both parents value and what they want the child to be. It's not about what the child wants. So usually the child who is cast into the golden child role, they are basically in the greatest danger of becoming an abusive person themselves when, well, they might become that as a child already, or when they grow up, because they just have so many privileges, and they don't get punished, so they have the power. And because they are also traumatized, they will feel the need to, they will have a lot of suppressed emotions and a lot of anger, and will feel the need to externalize that. And because they have the power, they will have learned that whatever they do is okay. So there are no boundaries for them, and they do not need to fear punishment. So that puts them at a great risk of becoming an abusive person, which doesn't have to be the case, of course, but it's a great risk factor. And they also are least likely, I would say, to ever find out that they have been abused and that they are traumatized, because from their conscious experience, they believe that everything's okay. They think, I'm fine, everything's good, I'm accepted, I'm successful, why should I complain? Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I can say to that role. The second role would be that of the scapegoat, who is a child, which is basically the opposite of the golden child. So the scapegoat can do no right, everything they do is wrong. And they are basically the punching bag for the whole family. And once the most powerful parent chooses a child as the scapegoat, all the other members of the family learn that it's okay to abuse this child and to, let out all of their pent-up frustration and anger, to let it all out on them. because they are the scapegoat, so they do not need to fear punishment of attacking them. You know, if another member of the family might, if they attack the goat child, they would have to fear consequences from the most powerful parent. But with the scapegoat, they exist basically to be blamed, and this sort of shifts the focus. You know, if they're obviously a dysfunctional family, there will be a lot of problems, a lot of chaos, a lot of trauma, and to distract from all of these problems, all of the blame for everything that goes wrong is put onto the scapegoat. And that also allows for the abuse or the unhealthy behavior to continue, because no one ever asks, what's wrong with our family? Why is all of this happening? Everyone thinks, oh, you know, it's a scapegoat because everything's their fault. They are like the bad child. And scapegoats, they might very often be children who, you know, who don't naturally conform, or who are naturally critical thinkers, who think or feel very deeply, and that's why they start to notice things. They ask questions. They don't just accept the power rules in the family. They might question the power of the most powerful parent, and obviously that's, you know, that will get them punished. That will make them a problem in the eye of the most powerful parent if their rule is being questioned. So in that respect, a dysfunctional family can be very much like a dictatorship, and you can draw a lot of parallels to, you know, the system of a family and the system of a society. Because in a society you also have more privileged groups, you have more oppressed groups, you have those who are in power. And basically everything that you see is going on in this dysfunctional family is also what you see happening in our society, because we don't have equality. So with a scapegoat, it can be very different. You know, they might end up being an abuser, they might not be, they might be a huge champion for justice, also social justice. It really depends on all of the individual context, because the scapegoat learns that they are bad, right? So when a child learns, you know, what the child learns of how the parents see the child, they internalize that and they believe that, and it becomes their self-image. So if someone believes they are bad, well, they might as well act bad. You know, if everybody says you're acting bad, everybody wants you, expects you to be bad, so they might become a criminal, for example. But they might also have this very deep sense of injustice happening, and they might feel very deeply about that, and they might also have a very strong sense of responsibility because they learned everything is their fault. So they might also be someone who tries to fix everything and to do something about other injustices in society or in other people's lives. So it really depends on a lot of factors, of the person and of the family and of the abuse and everything. But scapegoats do have generally good chances to get away from the family. You know, they might actually be exiled from the family, or they might get away themselves. So unlike the golden child, they will be much more aware of suffering in this family, and they will experience a lot more conscious anger and hurt. So it's much more likely that they will distance themselves from the family. Okay, and another role is that of the lost child. What they typically experience most is emotional neglect, and it might also be physical neglect. So they are basically the child who is forgotten, who gets ignored by the parents, and mostly also by the siblings if they have any. So that's why they're lost. This might be for different reasons. It might be that they have a lot of siblings and all of the other roles are already filled. Typically the parents will need a child who is the golden child, and they will need someone who is the scapegoat. It's like the psychological system of the family really needs these two roles. And then if there are more children, there might not be any roles to fill in anymore. So they might be just ignored because the parent who is most in power might just feel like, I don't have any use for this child. And that's a really cruel thing. So the lost child basically learns that they don't matter, they are not important. And they also, they basically learn to give up very early on, to fight or do anything to get the acceptance and love of the parents, because they just got the message from the beginning that there is nothing they can do to receive it, because nobody wants to have anything to do with them, not even to shout at them or get angry at them. So they cannot get any attention, so they have to give up. And because they learned so early on that there's nothing they can do to gain acceptance and they had to give up, they can very often be underperformers in school or university or in a job, or they might have trouble getting a job. They also might be someone who hides a lot and stays away from social gatherings. It might be a child who always sits at the back in school, always at the back of the bus, or they always try to avoid attention because it's useless anyway. But whenever I say that this might be a typical expression of this role, it doesn't have to be that way, because everyone's individual and everyone's experience is individual, so it can be completely different. So another role is that of the clown or the family mascot. So they are a child who basically learn that they can not fix the family either, but there's something they can do to release tension and sort of make things a bit more bearable for themselves and others too, maybe. And they learn that by making jokes or being funny in some way, they can gain at least some acceptance. So this can have a lot to do with a police trauma response or with a flight reaction, or a mix of both. So they're basically trying to distract themselves and everybody else from what's really going on. It's like a coping mechanism. And of course, it will also usually be the most powerful parent who picks this role for a child. So it might just be a child who's naturally very expressive, or very extroverted, or who really pick up on the social and psychological undercurrents of a situation and of other people. So this might be a person who seems very happy most of the time, but beneath that happiness and being funny is of course also trauma. But it might be really difficult for someone in this role to notice that there's something wrong with the family and they are traumatized, because they just learn to run away from it and make a joke about it and everything's okay. And then the last role is that of the surrogate parent or the parentified child. So this is just a role reversal where the child acts like the parent to both parents or the most powerful parent. And they basically learn that they are responsible for everything. They are responsible for taking care of the parents and usually also of their siblings if they have any. They feel responsible for how the parent is feeling emotionally and how they are doing. They might be a child who has, basically doesn't get to have a real childhood because they have to act like an adult from day one. So they have to do the shopping, they have to do the housework at home, they have to cook, they have to look after their siblings. They need to make sure that their parents are happy and that they look after themselves. They might have to entertain the parent, and so they don't get to have a life of their own. They are basically a slave to the parent. And people in this role usually end up being people pleasers or egoists because they just learn that all of their existence revolves around other people, and they don't learn to be attentive to their own needs and what they want, and they don't even feel like they have their own life. Typically when they are alone, they don't know what to do, they don't know who they are. They always need someone to relate to and to do something for them. So it's like they usually have no sense of identity at all. So these are the roles, and usually when a child is put into such a role, they start to identify, they build their whole identity and self-image around that role, and they take it with them wherever they go. They will still be stuck in that role in any other relationship, and it might be who they see themselves within society and just how they find themselves. So part of the trauma work here really is to learn that you are not your role, that you have your own personality completely dependent of this role. And for me, it really helped me to learn about this whole model and to figure out, when I read about these roles, I immediately recognized which was my role. And it was like a huge revelation to me, like, oh, so that's what was going on. And it really has helped me in my recovery journey to see it through this lens so I can understand, and making sense of what happened to you is a very important part of trauma recovery. And learning about this model really helped me to understand why I had certain beliefs about myself and why I was feeling a certain way or why certain things triggered me. Well, and it can also be possible that a child, they might start out as one role in the family, but over time something might change and they might get cast into a different role. Or they might have two roles, not at the same time, but they are always switching. So in some situations they might be in this role, and other situations in the other. Or it might be different between different family members. So I figured out also from the very beginning that I had been in two different roles. And for me, that meant that different parts of me feel that they are either one or the other role, which makes perfect sense. So that was also really important for me to learn about my parts and their identity. which also means that in different situations or in different relationships, I might be in one or the other role, depending on which parts also come up. And all of this might be really, really important, I think, for anyone who has experienced childhood trauma and has been in a dysfunctional family. This can be incredibly freeing to figure out what role or roles they were in. It will just teach them so much, not only of what happened to them, but also of what is happening to them now and how they relate to themselves and how they relate to others. So it really covers the whole board of your whole life, and that's so important to know what's going on for you. So I think this can be really useful information for people to know, and even if you've not been in a dysfunctional family, it's still really something important to know, just, about trauma in general. And definitely some people will have been in these roles, and it also, just when you observe others, you will start recognizing these roles, and it can be really helpful for people to know that. In the description, you will find a couple of links to websites that have a general rundown of the different roles and also more information on particular roles. There are even some therapists who specialize in helping people who have been in a certain role. So thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye!